Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of YouTube Developers Live. My name is Ikai Lan.
And I'm Jeff Posnick.
And we've got a great show for you guys today. So before we get started, it's probably a good time for us to plug Google I/O. Now tell us about Google I/O, Jeff.
Yeah, I will plug the recaps of Google I/O. So slightly late to plug the current year, but we do fortunately have a great set of session videos for all of the YouTube sessions and all the other Google API sessions, and they're available on YouTube right now. You could watch them all. They're about 30 to 40 minutes for each one. Mm-hmm. And the best way to get all the list of YouTube related sessions is to visit our dedicated YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/YouTubeDev. And we have a playlist going there to look at all the other videos kind of mixed together. It's on the channel that you're watching right now, which is youtube.com/Google Developers. So there's a ton of great stuff there.
Yeah, I was just kind of hoping you would say, so tickets are sold out. Also, the event is over.
Right.
So, all right, anyway, enough of that. So today we're going to be talking about a couple of things that are very important to developers. Now, Ibrahim, can you go to the slide screen? So Ibrahim's helping us produce in the back. Sometimes you've seen him on different shows. Today we're going to be talking about how to use the API reference and how the API reference translates into code. Now, we're going to show you how to use the API Explorer, how these actually map to HTTP requests, then we're going to go ahead and do some live coding in Java. I've also got some Python samples, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time in it. Now, what's really great is you might be asking, why don't Ikai and Jeff, I don't use Python or Java. I use
Ruby.
I use Ruby or PHP. So the good news is that all of these will translate very well to the other languages, and you just have to take a look at the code samples we posted on developers.google.com/YouTube to see kind of where the differences are and how to do a translation. But everything that we talk about today is going to map very well to the other languages.
Yeah, it also maps well to other APIs.
Right.
So if you're a YouTube data API developer, you're getting used to our client libraries, but if you ever start using Google Plus APIs, the Drive APIs, some of those other Google products, we have the same client libraries that pretty much operate in the same way, just regardless of which API is there.
That's right.
Makes it easy to mash up different APIs in the same application, and everything that Ikai is talking about today, will apply to developers using other APIs as well.
Now that's enough hand waving for you guys today. We're going to show you what we're talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and open up Google Chrome. Now I'm going to mention that everything we're talking about is about the V3 API. So you should be using this, the V3 Data API. So I'm here right now on our favorite site, and I'm going to try to blow this up a little bit. This is developers.google.com/YouTube. Right? And if you can't find this page, you can just go to your favorite search engine and search for YouTube and V3 API, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know. I always have this tab open.
I Google myself. I search for Jeff Posnick, and I find all the articles I write and stuff,
Now I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click on a right-hand tab, and I'm going to go to version 3. And you'll see that all of our stuff is here in the documentation, and we've also got an API reference. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to kind of look over this API reference right here. Now, I'm going to spend the next half hour going through every method and every call. Just kidding. Oh. I'm not actually going to do that. Instead, we're going to do a quick introduction into what this actually means. Okay? So let's take a look, and let's go to the API Explorer and give you a preview of what we're talking about. So I'm going to go to Videos, and I'm going to go to Lists. Now, don't worry if this doesn't make any sense yet. I will explain what this means. So this is what our API reference looks like. We have the methods, we have the parts, we have what the response might look like, and at the bottom, what we have here is we have the API Explorer, and this allows us to test our API without writing any code. So let's go ahead and just make a quick API call now, right? Let's see, ID snippet. Now I'm going to go ahead and pull a video. This is a show that we did, one of my first shows I did for YouTube. I'm going to plug this in here into ID, and I'm going to hit execute. Now you'll see that what this is doing is this is making an API call, and it's returning some data about my video. My video here is things new developers say, right? And here's the description. So now if we come back to the API Explorer, you'll see that this maps right here in a much more machine parsable format. Now let's review what this is actually doing. So what this API Explorer is doing is it's helping us make HTTP requests to the API server, and it's printing out the data in JSON. So what does this HTTP request look like? Well, we're doing the GET. We're calling googleapis.com/YouTube v3 videos, and we're passing it some data. And this is because the v3 APIs use what's called a RESTful style. And in a RESTful style, we have a verb and usually a resource, because a lot of API calls tend to follow this convention of the verb usually maps to what do you want to do, and the resource is, well, what do you want to get? What do you want to operate on? So what that looks like is, in the RESTful style, a verb typically maps to a particular operation. And when you take a look at the API reference for YouTube, you'll see that the verbs map to certain API calls, and I'll show you what this means. Whereas a resource can be a video, a channel, a playlist, or anything else. Now, if you're working with the Google Drive API, this might be a folder, it might be a file. I don't know what the exact things are called. I'll know if I look in the API reference.
It's also worth pointing out that that particular API call can map to multiple resources. You can put in a list of different IDs there and get back information about all of them. In this particular example, you're just doing one, though.
I'm just doing one, yes. So when we take a look at these methods here, you'll see that there's a list, insert, update, and delete methods. So whenever you're in the API reference, you can click on the resource that you want to get at, and then you'll see the different methods, which are what you can do. Now, list will usually be a get operation, and it'll map to give me some information. Whereas insert will be a new object being added. Update is usually updating an existing object, and delete usually deletes the object. Now, video also has some, I don't want to say they're non-standard, but outside of the 4 verbs, we can also get a rating, and we can also rate videos. Yep. So another way that this could have been structured, for instance, I've seen this done on different sites, is we would have a ratings resource, and we would insert or update. But really, this is just a matter of style, and this is perfectly correct, and it works too.
Sure.
So let's go back to the API call that we just made. All right. Now, what did we really just do underneath the hood? Well, we did this, right? We entered in the part, we entered in the ID, and we executed this. And the API Explorer made an HTTP call for us. So what we're going to do now is we're going to show you using curl, which is a command line tool available on Linux-based systems, be it Linux, OS X, BSD, I don't know. If I left them all?
I'm sure people ported it.
You guys know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Haven't seen this on Windows, but I'm sure there's a Windows version somewhere.
There's got to be HTTP user agents for the Windows command line. Yeah.
So curl allows us to fetch HTTP, and this is what the browser does, except the browser also takes the data and it renders it for you. So curl is just going to give us the raw output, whether it's an XML, HTML, or whatever. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to show how the API Explorer translates the curl. So Ibrahim, can you go ahead and put some? Thank you. He's such a great producer. So I'm going to go ahead now and show you what this looks like if I do curl HTTP. Let's mix it up a little. My slide says Google. Let's see what YouTube's homepage looks like. Whoa, there's a lot of stuff going on here, right? And you'll see that this is just HTML, and that's what we expect to see. Now, when we go to the browser and we go to youtube.com and we view source, if I can find where to do it,
just right-click, yeah.
View page source. You'll see that it's going to look very similar, if not the same thing, right? So that's what curl does. And now let's go and see how we can use curl to go from to do some things with the API. So you'll see that right here we're making a GET request, and we're fetching this string right here. Right? Now, just a caveat, at the end you'll see your API key. I'm not replacing that only because I'm curious to see what will happen. I think this still might work.
I think you're overly optimistic about that.
Oh, I'm wrong. It doesn't work. And if you see, I'm getting back JSON, and this is what the server's telling me. It's telling me that the key is invalid and this is a bad request. Okay. So I'm going to have to go ahead and fix that. And to fix that, I'm going to go to the API console. And to get to the API console, you go to code.google.com/API/console, and here I am. And don't bother stealing these keys. I'm going to change them after the show. and break all of my test code, by the way. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the key, and the key that I'm going to use for this API call is a simple API key. Now, the difference between a simple API key and the client ID, client secret key is that the simple API key can be used most places where you don't need an authenticated user. So the way I like to think about it is, what can you do on youtube.com without logging in? And those are things that you can do with a simple API key. Yeah. And one of the things you can do is get information on a video because you need to watch a video.
And this is actually a place where the version 3 of the API differs from the older versions, version 2, version 1, in that we did allow really completely anonymous access in version 2 and version 1. So you might be familiar with just being able to make these requests without having to register for a key. You do have to register for a key in version 3, but it's easy. You know, just one piece of information to keep track of, basically.
Well, thank you for buying me some time, Jeff.
Yeah.
So I've gone ahead and I've copied the key over to the command line. It looks like I've got this put out correctly. Yep. So now let's go ahead and run this again. You'll see that I am getting back the data about this video, and it's the same thing that's happening over here in the API Explorer. So you don't have to do it in curl. Again, the API Explorer is just a way for, curl is just another way you can do this. And one of the reasons curl is nice is because when you're actually writing code, it may be easier for you to output, say, hey, you know, what's the URL I'm fetching and what the parameters I'm passing, and pass on to curl instead of going back to the API Explorer and plugging the values back in. Now, the API Explorer still has a lot of neat functionality, and we'll get into what some of that functionality is, because when you start to make more and more complex requests, it becomes a lot easier to build out the API call in the API Explorer first before translating it into code.
Yeah, and there's nice documentation for each of the parameters in the API Explorer also, which I'm sure folks who go there will appreciate. I know I always appreciate it.
He appreciates it.
Yes, good job to our tech writing team.
wrote some of the samples in the docs and stuff.
Well, yeah.
So let's go ahead and let's put this into practice. You want to put this into practice, Jeff?
I would love for you to put it in practice.
I would love to observe practice, and he's going to observe me.
Yes.
That's what we're going to do now. We're going to do something that a lot of people have asked for, which is we're going to write some code that lets me fetch my likes, the videos that I have liked.
Sure.
Right now, a lot of people have come and asked us, well, how do I do this, right? How do I write some code that fetches my likes? And as a V3 of the API, there's a very interesting approach to how we do this, and I think it makes sense. So what we do when you want to fetch the videos you've liked is that your likes belong in a playlist, and that playlist is part of your channel. Now again, you might have multiple channels, but each channel will have one likes playlist. So what we're going to do is we're going to get that playlist, we're going to get the playlist ID, then we're going to make an API call against the playlist API to find all the videos that belong on that playlist. Does that sound good to you? Am I leaving anything out?
It does sound good to me. This is the same sort of method you could use to get a list of all the videos that are in any playlist or your uploads playlist. This is how, you know, if you wanted to get all the videos that are uploaded in a specific channel, same method, just slightly different.
Watch later playlists.
Yeah,
but these are all the concepts of a playlist. This is, again, you can use this again for get my uploads. The only reason I'm changing this around a little bit is because we already have a couple of code samples for get my uploads in pretty much every language. So I'm only modifying this a little bit, but really I think the code is exactly, it's very much the same except for one string substitution. Okay, oops, getting ahead of myself. So now let's go ahead and do that now. I am in the API Explorer, and like I mentioned, I need to fetch your channels, right? I need to fetch your channel, and I need to figure out, hey, what is the ID of my likes playlist? Now, unfortunately, it's not a predictable string. Like, you can't just take your channel name, append dash playlist, and have that be your ID. So instead, we're going to have to go ahead and query the API and figure out what the ID of that playlist is.
Yes.
That makes sense?
It does. You talk about you here, knowing your playlist. So I assume there's going to be some sort of...
It's going to be my playlist, which is going to be for my test account.
No. And it seems like there has to be some component here where the code actually knows who you are. So hopefully you'll talk about that too.
He's trying to lure me into talking about authentication.
I bait Ekai all the time to try to get him into talking about OAuth too.
he actually does do this. We have an article coming out soon.
Yeah.
No ETA on that. So let's go ahead and start playing around with the Explorer right now. Right?
Cool.
Now let's go find my channel. I'm going to click on channels over here in the API Explorer. I'm going to zoom in on this so you guys can see what I'm doing. Now, a channel resource contains information about a YouTube channel. All I did was read that off the documentation. So we can update data about the channel, or we can find information about a channel. If we want to find information, it's a list operation. So I'm going to go ahead and click list. Okay? Now, I'm going to go ahead and scroll down, and you'll see that I have the API Explorer here. I'm not going to enter anything in here, and I'm just going to run this thing and see what happens. Okay? It's not going to work. Oh, I've got an error. What's the error? It's a bad request. Well, I need to put in a required parameter, which is part. So let me go ahead and do that. Let's get ID snippet content details. And where did I get these values from? Right here in this paragraph. Usually, most of the things that you want tend to come from ID snippet or content details. They vary slightly in what they do, and we'll experiment a little bit with this to see what it does. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and hit execute again. I have another error. I didn't pass in a filter.
There you go.
So when you're searching for channels, there are a few things that can happen. You might have to enter a filter to say, tell me, I want you to narrow down the types of channels I'm looking for. Now, really, I'm just looking for my channels. So right now, I'm logged into my test account, and my test account is dino.dinosaurtest@gmail.com.
Yes.
It's named after a stuffed dinosaur I keep on my desk at work. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down first and try to add a filter. And the filter here is going to be mine, right? Do I just want to get back my channels, Dino Dinosaurs channels? I'm going to click true, and I'm going to try to execute this again. More errors!
No.
What's going on? It's a 401 unauthorized, and we're saying, oh, this is an authorized request, authorization required.
Yeah.
What do I do? Also, there's a big red bar here that says, this method requires you to be authenticated. You may need to activate the toggle button above to authorize your request using OAuth 2.0.
Very handy hint.
I forgot to hit this button, Jeff. It was intentional. I've been in control of this show the whole time.
It's not the dino in the background pulling your strings.
All right, so now once I click this, it's going to ask me for which OAuth 2.0 scopes I want. I'm just going to click authorize. But again, this is a good place to test different scopes, right? Like I don't need the partner scope, I don't need the upload scope. Really, I only need the read-only scope. So I'm going to release this right here. I'm going to click authorize, and oops. All right, so what should happen is you should get a pop-up box that says, hey, do you want to grant the API Explorer access to your account? And you click OK or cancel. I've already done that in the past. That's why it's not showing up.
And that's actually a good thing. I mean, it's less things for your users to have to click through. If they've already granted approval once, we know about that. We don't have to ask them again.
But it's bad for the show because I can't show you what it looks like. But you'll see what this looks like when I run my sample, I hope.
Maybe we could do super slow motion of that little pop-up. Yeah. I don't know.
We'll have to come back to edit this later. Anyway, so let me go ahead now and scroll down and hit execute. Oh, well, what do you see? What do you know? There's my info right there.
Very cool.
Yeah. So it has information. My name is Dino Dinosaur. It's the name of my channel. And this is just a stock photo. It doesn't mean anything. And here are my different playlist IDs. So again, let's go ahead and run this in curl and see what happens, right? So we're curling this right here. And we're calling get on this URL. But we're going to have to pass in some special headers. Now, all right, it turns out I did put it in here. So we can add headers using the -h and a header colon value. So I'm going to go ahead and construct this curl command before I paste it to the command line, okay? So I'm going to do this now. I'm going to open up oops. All right, there we go. Hopefully you guys can see this. What do you think? Bigger? Curl. We can do bigger than that. We can do even bigger than this.
Make it bigger. There you go.
Make it bigger.
I'm not wearing my glasses, so I can't see anything.
How's this? Curl. Now let's go ahead and curl this URL. So I'm going to go ahead and copy paste. Of course, it chose to copy formatting information.
It's a well-formatted URL.
It is a well-formatted URL. There you go. All right. So you'll see here that this says your API key. We'll want to replace this with our API key, as it suggests. Let's go back to the API console. Now, remember earlier when I said you use a simple API key for simple requests?
Yes.
That would be for requests when you're saying that's public. But now I'm acting on behalf of the user, right? Really, I'm just acting on behalf of myself. I don't want to get too much into what this means, but anytime a user needs to be sent through the OAuth flow or prompted for authentication, this is when we would use the client secret. So let's go ahead and copy this. So we're going to use the client secret and not the simple API key.
And you're putting that,
I am.
You know what, Ikai? You don't actually have to do that.
Do you not?
No, this is not part of the show. This is
I tested this last night.
It won't hurt, but I will use this as a teaching opportunity to point out that anytime you are actually including OAuth 2 credentials in the request,
perhaps we should take a bet.
Okay.
What would you like to wager me, Jeff?
I don't know.
How about your firstborn child?
Hey, that's my son.
He actually has a child, so I don't. Yeah. It's not a real Rumpelstiltskin thing going on here.
No. Yeah. Whenever you actually do include OAuth 2 actual credentials, which I assume you're planning on doing.
I am doing that right now.
It's not necessary to put in an API key, and if you do put in an API key, it'll basically
will
be
continue to
ignored.
work. Well, let's test this right now.
Yeah.
So I've gone ahead and I've added this into my curl command, and you'll see I've added -h. Now this is all one line. I'm not adding in line breaks in here. We're going to add in this authorization and the bearer token. This in OAuth is what we call a access token.
Yes.
Yes.
This is
so
true.
I get the names mixed up. There's an access token. I guess this is actually a bearer token, but I guess that's synonymous.
It's a type of access token, yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes you need to use a refresh token to get a bearer token.
Yeah.
It's a little bit complex, and we're not going to get too much into that today. But we do understand it all, so this is not... All right,
we're not making this up as we go.
I'm going to go ahead and copy paste this into here. And it looks like I've lost the bet.
There you
go.
go.
I will tell you this. I think the reason I think that this didn't work is because I accidentally copied in the simple API key, and that causes something weird to happen. But we'll find out right now, since we can. So I'm going to go ahead and copy the simple API key in. All right, let's see right here. And key equals blah. And again, this is annoying because it's copying the formatting. Let's copy paste in here. And there you will get invalid credentials.
Okay.
So if you are getting invalid credentials when you're if you're hand rolling your own code, make sure that you're not passing a simple API key. Make sure that you are taking it out or using a client
putting
secret.
some random value in. Apparently that's better than an actual.
Well, I don't know. I don't think the random value will work. Let's try that. Let's give that a try. Random value.
I
am really...
That's not random enough.
There you go. You'll still get invalid credentials. So let's do one more test just for the lols.
Okay.
Just for the LOLs. Now I'm gonna
That's
go
what
ahead
the show's all about.
That's
what it's devolved into.
That's why.
Else.
That's what I do. That's why I do this show. We're gonna go ahead and copy paste this, and look, it works.
Okay.
So I feel like I win part of this bad, right? All right.
Part of my we're getting into like a King Solomon situation.
King Solomon situation.
I don't know.
We'll have to edit that joke out.
Okay.
I'm just kidding. We're not going to edit this show. so let's go back and see what we did here. Now again, I feel like I'm proving to you guys that this works and that this really is just making HTTP requests. The API Explorer is just really nice at helping us format some of these parameters. And I'll show you what this means. Now, really, the only thing that we need from here is this right here, is this likes ID from the likes playlist. So I'm looking at all this other data, and I don't really need it. So this likes ID comes under content details section. So why don't I go ahead and remove ID and snippet from here?
Cool.
Does that sound okay to you?
Sounds good to me. And that's what we would recommend doing too.
We recommend just kind of asking for exactly what you want. This is especially important if you're working on a mobile platform because you'll make fewer requests, and everything's going to be gzipped anyway, so it's all going to be small. It's not going to take up a lot more space. In fact, it's going to take very little, but it's just the best practice.
Yeah.
It's just keeping your house clean.
And there's quota benefits too, and all sorts of good reasons.
So let's take a look now at the response. Well, still got a lot of info. We still don't really need this here. So why don't we go ahead and, I don't really need the Google Plus user ID. So why don't we go ahead and filter this down a little bit.
Cool.
So that's done in the fields parameter of the request. So I'm going to click here and, oh, well, I can type anything in here. Let's see what happens. Oh, it blows up. It's a bad request. And this thing is thing is strict. All right, so I'm going to click instead on this tool called the Fields Editor. All right, now I can select everything, but I might as well not at this point, right?
Right.
So you'll see that in this, let's just execute this correctly. You'll see that this is in the items. This is in the items tag. So when we go back to the Fields Editor, let's expand the items tag. All right, we really only care about the content details. There you go.
Cool.
I think this is going to give us the exact same thing, actually.
No, it'll be a little less.
Yeah, you're right. So you'll see that, again, we're getting, this is all we're getting. We're getting back items and content details. And if I wanted more than this, I would go back and add more fields. Like, what do I want? How about the next page token? I'm not going to talk about this show, but the way pagination works is you pass the next page token in into the next API request. So when I scroll down here and there is no next page, therefore there's no next page token. But what you would do is when you do get back a token, you would pass it into this page token parameter, and that's how you go on paginating your requests.
And in another way you might use this, if you know that you only want the likes playlist ID, for instance, you can drill down even further within content details and say only return the likes playlist ID, but you don't need to.
So I'm going to go ahead and copy this right now, this ID. And let's go to a different page. Now, again, let's go to the API reference and let's click on playlist items, right? We're going to click on list, and it looks similar. So let's scroll down. Ooh,
passing all the sample code.
Passing all the sample code.
Yes.
We're gonna authorize the request. Click authorize. Let's see. Let's just get everything for now to see what we're getting.
Okay.
Right now, let's scroll down and put in a playlist ID and hit execute. And what do we see now? Well, we see, here we go. We see all the videos in my playlist. And the video, I made a playlist of dogs dancing. So
that's what Dino likes.
That's what Dino likes, not me.
Okay.
All right, let's go ahead and translate this into code. I'm going to open up IntelliJ. This is just the ID I'm using, and I commented out the code's already working in case we run out of time, which we might. We'll see. We'll just kind of play it by ear. So I'm going to go ahead and remove this because this is code I've already written. Now, if you download our Java samples, and these are available at code.google.com/p/youtube-api-samples, or you can search for YouTube API samples and find them.
They're also inline in the docs.
They're also inline to docs. For Java, it's better if you go to the samples because you get a Maven project.
Sure.
And that way you'll build everything for you. But once you've built it, then you can go ahead and make changes as needed. So all of this is this is boilerplate right here, right? I'm just asking for, I'm prompting the user for permission, I'm giving an HTTP transport, and I'm creating this YouTube client object. And this is what we're going to be working on. So again, let's try to remember what we did. Let's do a quick review. We listed the channels, and we got back content details. We set it to my playlist, and then we made an API call to the playlist items playlist. So let's go ahead and replicate that here. So the first thing we need to do is get my channels.
Yes.
Right. So I'm going to go ahead and write this code. And because I'm using IntelliJ and this is Java, I get code completion. So you'll see that all of these are available in the Java client. Now, what is it that we want to get? We want channels. So this will be the channels method. Now notice that there was also a capital channels. Now this is not what we want, and I'll show you what this means later. That's actually a package name. Now let's go back here to see what we did. You'll see that we did channels and a list operation. Now this is really important. All right, we're going to channels and list. Why? Because we have a method here called list.
That is always useful.
It's very useful, and it takes a string. Now, what goes in that string? Let's scroll down and see. Well, there's the one required bit, which is the part. So let's go ahead and copy content details, create a string here, and now we start to set parameters on. And this is using the Java builder pattern, right? So let's go ahead and set mine. And this is kind of a funny thing. We need to use a string true and not a Boolean true. In some of the languages, you could just get away with a Boolean instead of a string. But if a Boolean doesn't work, just try passing in the string and see what happens. All right. Now, I think that's all we need. So we're going to go ahead and call execute on that. And you'll see that the return type is a channel list response. All right. So channel list response. channel response. Oh, we can just do that. Autocomplete saves a day. And the channel list response is something that responds to the iterator. It implements iterator. So what that means is we can say, well, let's, I'm sorry, get items does. So there's a channel list response, and we're going to call get items on it, right? Because get items returns an array, because that's what this returns down here into JSON, right? Like this is a JSON array, and this translates into a Java, more or less a Java list.
Yeah, it's really nice that there's a direct mapping between what you see in the JSON and what the methods and parameters are in the Java client library and all the other client libraries too.
Now let's go ahead and just for fun, let's go ahead and output. Let's go ahead and output. Let me see how I did this. Content details. We care about, so this, every one of these objects has a content details and related playlist. So what that means is we can say channel.get content details .get related playlist. There you go.
There you go.
And we get back a related playlist object. So we can say get, and do we want to get the likes, favorite, uploads, or watch history? Let's get back to likes.
Sure.
All right. Now we're just printing this for now, so let's go ahead and run this code.
And while it's running, I think what you kind of just did is something you'll find yourself doing a lot when you're writing code, going back and forth between the API Explorer and looking at like what the actual response looks like, and then translating that into code in whatever language you're working with.
And this is too small on screen, but you'll see that it output the channel ID.
Cool.
So now we've done.
So
the
you must
first
already
step.
be authenticated.
Yeah,
authorized.
That's a good point, Jeff. I'm already authorized, so that's because I ran this yesterday. But really, if I go ahead and actually, it saves the credentials in this weird directory in my home directory, so I don't want to clear that right now.
Right.
But normally what this should do is this should open up your default browser and ask you, do you want to give this registered application access to act on your behalf? And then you would say yes or no.
But again, this is another important point that a lot of people kind of struggle wrapping their heads around. Even though you're using OAuth 2, and the initial time you go through it, you have to open up a browser and click OK. Most of the client libraries have ways of saving those credentials and reusing them, and that's what Ekai just demonstrated. So after you do that once, you really don't have to keep going to a browser. It'll save it for you.
And in a future show, we'll talk about some of the different strategies you can use to save these tokens for long-lived reuse. One question that we commonly get is, well, I'm going to be running this on a headless box, right? I don't want the user to have to authenticate every time. And you don't have to, because what you can use an offline token. You can authenticate on your own laptop, save the token, copy the token onto the server, and then just use that token over and over. Or you can just have the server spin up a temporary web page, have you authenticate, and then quickly take down the web server. And we'll show you some strategies about saving a token. Really, saving a flat file, saving a database, whatever you like.
There's different ways.
We're going to show you some ways to do this future show. Not this show.
Indeed.
All right, so now we have this likes playlist ID variable. So let's go ahead and make the second API call. So the second API call, if you recall, we're going back to playlist items. And this is another list call. So let's go back to our YouTube client. And let's do this. YouTube, this is our YouTube client, dot playlist items. Hey, autocomplete's great.
Cool.
Now, I've already imported all these, and that's why some of these I didn't have to do anything. But usually your IDE will be smart enough to say, hey, which one of these do you want to import? Right? Do you want to import? And it'll give you a hint, and you could say, yes, that's the one. And you'll see that on top, it'll handle the importing of everything for you, as long as you have the correct jar files in your class path. So that's important. And if you use Maven, those will all be taken care of for you. So a good place to start is from the Maven, from our samples, download the necessary imports, and you could just get all this autocomplete for free. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call a list call. Why a list call? Because again, we're trying to list the playlist items here. Now let's scroll down a little bit. It expects a string, and intuitively, it might be intuitive for you to pass the playlist ID, but really, if you remember what we did here, this corresponds to part parameter. So the part parameter was ID, comma, snippet, comma, content details. So let's pass that in here. Now let's set a value. This is using the builder pattern, and we're going to call set playlist ID. And with this, we're going to give it the playlist ID we just got. We're going to execute it.
Is content details for this call too? I thought it was just
there's ID, snippet, and content details according to the docs.
Let's see what it.
Let's take a look, see what it actually does. It gives you the video ID.
Okay, that's actually kind of useful.
Kind of useful stuff. All right. So let's go ahead and do this. We're going to go ahead and I think this is called playlist item list response. Let's see, playlist item list response. And this is right. Now, if I got this type wrong, like if I said, oh yeah, let's give it a playlist list response, right? This is going to complain. It's going to say, hey, that's not right. And this is IntelliJ, so it's gonna fix this for me if I hit Alt Enter. So
sure.
Eclipse will do something similar with Command 1, Control 1, whatever system you're on. So now let's go ahead and let's just output all the titles of these videos, right? And again, let's scroll down to the API Explorer. You'll see that there's also an items array, right? And where is the title in the items array? It's in items. It's in title. It's in snippet of each particular item, and it's in right here in title. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's do playlist item response. For playlist item in playlist response item, get items. There we go. Now this is strongly typed, so we'll say string title is equal to item dot get snippet dot get title, and I think this will work. That's not right. I don't want that. I'm going to save this. I'm going to go ahead and run this thing again. This makes me, and there you go. You see that it's outputting all of these things. Now, there's an optimization we can do here, which is, let's go ahead and do a quick optimization. Now, we only want one field from here. So why don't we go ahead and see what we can do to filter down the fields that we need.
Sure.
And we talked about this earlier in the show using a fields editor. Let's go ahead and click this. Items, let's expand this. And this was in snippet. So let's go to snippet, close, and execute it. And there we go. We've narrowed it down significantly. Now, let's see if we can narrow it down even more. I wonder if this will work. /title. And there you go. It works.
I'm going to tell you, because this is actually a good practice, be sure that you actually modify your part parameter to get rid of content details.
That's right.
Because it's very wasteful to request content details and then filter it out.
So let's remove ID and content details.
Yeah.
Right. Oh, well, there you go. Now all we have is this. So let's go back and let's optimize our code a little bit. Let's see. We only use snippets, so remove snippet and content details. Now, we still need to filter this out. So before the execute, let's add a new method. Set fields, And the fields, we copy paste here in fields, what we have here in fields. All right, so this is one long line. We probably want to format this better, but I'm not going to do that for this show. We're going to run this code. And there you go. It still works. It's still efficient. Now, we could go ahead and also do this with the initial playlist request, which I'm not going to do now for time reasons.
Yeah, we're definitely facing some time constraints.
I am going to show you guys one last thing before we jump off.
Yeah.
Which is, sometimes because these are string values, they're easy to get wrong. So let's say instead of snippet, you put content details. Right now, this is still just compile time. So when we compile this, this will still compile because there's still a get snippet method on the playlist item. But this won't work.
Right.
So let's go ahead and run this code and figure out, let's see what happens. This is going to blow up. Okay, it didn't want to blow up. Let's do a better example.
I'm sure you can make something blow up.
I can make this blow up. We're just going to go ahead and instead of title, we're going to say blah. That'll make this blow up. There you go. Invalid field selection or pointers or whatever. Excuse me. A title. What's another field here? Let's just find a good example. I'm going to go ahead and execute this. Let's go ahead and instead of ask for title, we'll ask for channel ID. I don't know why we would do that. All right. We're going to get a null pointer exception. There you go. So we're getting null. What's going on here, Jeff? Help me, Jeff. I'm just kidding. Don't help me.
Yeah, no.
I'll show you what's going on here. So let's go ahead. I'm going to click here to set a debug breakpoint. I'm going to run, and I'm going to call debug in my IDE. It's going to do this. Now, we've made the API call already. So I wish I could blow this up. Let's see. Maybe there's a magnifying glass thing I can use. Well, just try this out, and you'll see what I mean. When you go down here into debug window, you'll see, oh, okay, well, let's see what's in this playlist item response variable. Let's open this up. All right, so it's got the items. It's got the items array. It's got the items key. But what's in here? What's the value in here? Oh, it's the snippet. That's cool. And you can keep expanding down to see what's going on. And what you'll find is that inside the snippet, there's only the channel ID. So that's not what we want. So let's go ahead and stop this. And let's go ahead and fix this back into title. Now let's go ahead and debug this again. Let's drill down. And we are going to see that if we keep drilling down, oh, okay, we correctly are getting the title in here. So we can go ahead and continue. And you should really learn how to use debugger, because you can step over, step over, step over, step over, step over. And it'll go ahead and it'll output the titles of a video.
Sure.
And this is another good way of debugging this. And there are many, many good ways of doing this. And just, I know I keep saying one last thing. There's going to be one last thing here. And the one last thing here is just going to be a quick introduction to the fact that the other client libraries also look very similar. Now, this is some Python code. We don't have any time to run this, but you'll see that once you have a YouTube client, you call channels. And this maps directly to the code that we've written here, right? Call channels. We're calling list. Now, the way we pass the part is a little bit different. We set mine equal to true, and again, this does take the Boolean. We call execute, and then we iterate over items, which isn't a get items method, but it's just items inside. It's inside a dictionary. So
it's a little bit more Pythonic.
A little bit more Pythonic, definitely. No types. When I was writing this, I totally forgot, what some of these were called, and that's one of the benefits of using something like Java, or even if you're using the Go client library, you can get auto-completion when you're using the correct plugins for Go Sublime. And you'll see that I'm just iterating through this, making another playlist API call here, execute, playlist ID. I'm passing it this playlist ID, which I fetched from this parameter. This code is not as optimized. I didn't filter it down to just the methods I needed, but you'll likely be doing this when you're writing your production code. And once that's done, we iterate through this and we print, well, I'm printing a video ID here, but you could just as well print the title. And you'll see that the other client libraries all do the same thing. So maybe in a future show, let us know what language you're using, what language you care about. I suspect PHP and .NET are big in there, and we'll talk about doing that show in the future. So that is, let's just do a quick recap of what we talked about today. All right, we did some error handling, and in Python, you would use PDB, Python debugger, set trace, very cool stuff. And in Python, you can do a few more things because it's interpreted, you can actually inject more code while you're debugging. All right, so quick recap. Definitely use the API reference. The API Explorer is your friend. It's available not just for YouTube API, but for many other popular Google APIs, such as Drive, Analytics, I believe, anything that you do in the API console, you can do in the API Explorer for the most part. Curl is also your friend, because I didn't get to show you guys this today, but one thing that we can do is we can output kind of what we think we're fetching, and we can run that to curl to figure out, is my code doing something weird? Because realistically, these objects aren't just going to be in one block of code. You might be doing some crazy things where you're passing it around. I personally don't encourage this style of coding, but you may have special needs, or you might be using a special HTTP client. So what you want to do, especially using special HTTP client, is to compare what your HTTP client is doing versus curl, which is just kind of unadulterated HTTP. Now, why might you be using a special HTTP client? Maybe you're batching requests, right? And your client will batch them because you're on a mobile platform. Maybe you're using Google App Engine using URL fetch. There are many reasons and many valid reasons why you might want to use a different HTTP transport. So that's why it's always nice to have curl as a fallback to see, is it just my API key that isn't correct, and we're just not formatting this correct, and so on. So it's pretty easy to translate API reference into code. Now, what gets slightly harder is debugging issues. Now, fortunately, we'll talk about this in a future show, but I'm just catching exception E. But there's another exception you can catch here called the Google JSON exception. And in this JSON reception, you can get details, get cause, and you can match these against things and figure out what's going on, so you can respond to errors at runtime. And that's really nice. And there are places where you might want to do that, such as if a user doesn't have a YouTube channel, right? You might, and I've talked a little bit about this in my Google I/O talk, and I told you this is coming. I'm going to plug it. Mobile best practices with mobile on YouTube. Check it out. There is a bit where I talk about how to handle this case. So that's all that I have for you guys today. Here are some useful links. And Jeff, did you have any questions?
That was super thorough. So not really any questions here, but if you do have any questions,
Are you sure you don't have any questions?
I mean, I know that we're hiring, and I know that's what you're getting at.
That's what we're getting at.
I wanted to plug
here.
Stack Overflow as a way to ask questions.
Stack Overflow.
If people do have questions, Stack Overflow using the YouTube-API tag is the best place to ask general programming questions, and then I guess I'll feed you. Are we hiring?
We are hiring. Thank you for.
Yes.
I didn't expect you to ask me that question. Check us out on developers.google.com/jobs. We are hiring in many sites around the world, including our headquarters in Mountain View, New York City, for a variety of different positions in developer relations. That's just not just YouTube. Also, apps DevRel. It's our shorthand. Google Plus, AdWords, Cloud. There's so many things.
It's a ton of teams, and everybody needs more help. So
yeah, everybody needs help because there's never enough. I was going to say there's never enough work, and that's incorrect.
No,
there's never enough
wrong.
time to do all the work that needs to be done, and some of that work includes creating these shows for you guys.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for setting me up. It was kind of a slow setup, but thank you for setup.
Yes.
And we will catch you guys next time. All right.
See you, everybody.
Take it easy, guys.
Cheers.